Hey, everybody. We're going to wait like a few minutes until more people show up, and then we'll start. Feel free to use the chat and send me any messages or questions you have as we do all of this. Super excited. It's the first time I get to do one of these, so hope you guys enjoy everything. Hey, welcome if you're just showing up, by the way. We're just going to start in a few minutes, but I just want to wait till some more people show up before I get started. Hello, welcome. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about the age-old concept of how you make your voice stronger, which it can be a little less linear than you might think. So there's certainly some tricks in having the right kind of routine to make sure you're using the right muscles. I think that's really key. But we'll get into that all in a little bit. G2 Dave. Okay, yeah. Very good. That's sort of the thing too, just to start talking about this is we all have slightly different ranges. And so figuring out figuring out a nice comfortable place to start is actually kind of key. We're going to talk about this. There's a tendency to want to try and reach for high notes to make your voice more powerful. And as we go up in frequency, it does carry more and it can be loud. But ultimately, actually, it's better to work on your coordination a little lower, get rid of certain kinds of tensions, and then all of a sudden your voice is going to be a lot louder. So we'll talk about this in a little bit when we get started. But yeah, how's everyone doing? I just see a few more people showing up. Yeah, totally. And that's the thing is, we can kind of scream out pitches sometimes. And it's just sort of on borrowed time, right? So you might be able to hit a note, but it's really about how you hit the note and what it feels like afterwards and how many times you can hit that note. So this happens to even like really professional musicians. They can hit notes well, but over time, as they're performing a lot, it starts to get harder and harder to do, in a really long set. And then they start to get into trouble because of perhaps the way that they're coordinating all of that. It's a little less efficient. So that's always my plug here. It's about finding efficiency in your voice. And it doesn't mean that like I'm a better singer, you're a better singer. We all, ultimately, I think a free voice is really beautiful, especially when it fits the art that you're doing. It's just a matter of, I like to find ways that people can maintain that and, make sure that it feels comfortable. So that's really the goal here, checking for habits that can easily accumulate as you start to work on harder music and you try to get your sound to come out a little more. And I think this is a big part of it, right? It's like strengthening your voice. What does that mean to you? It usually means like, can I be heard? Can I have my voice pop out, have a fullness to it? And yes, definitely us singers got to stick together. I really, I'm super excited about doing this. We're going to start in just like a minute. And hopefully more people will show up and catch wind with this. But, I really think it's about developing a community where we can all work on these things and share ideas. And please, send me comments, message me here as we go if you have particular questions or something feels confusing, because that's, the age-old difficulty here is turning a feeling-based art form into something that can be understood and communicated to other people, especially as our voices all are in slightly different places. So I really talk about what it means to bring your voice into balance. G5, very nice. What is that? 1, 2, 3. That's pretty high. That sounds like a soprano-y to me. So Very cool. Yeah, but again, let me preface, and this is actually a really great starting point. The art of getting your voice to be loud and full isn't necessarily about always hitting the high notes. I mean, certainly that's something that comes from all of this, but really the best place to practice this is in a lower part of your register so that you can get the proper coordination and work out certain habits that are going to maybe start to block what's happening here. A classic thing, if your head and your neck's coming out, we'll talk about this. It's usually a sign you're not supporting your sound enough from your belly and your back. So with this, let's get started. And yes, please feel free to ask any questions as we go. I really want this to be something that's more interactive, even though it's a little tricky because I'm just sort of talking to myself a little bit in an echo chamber. I really like it when I have a little bit of feedback from students to work off of. So the idea for this live stream is, how do we strengthen our voice, and what does that mean, and what kinds of exercises are helpful for that? A lot of the vocal practice is about finding the right kinds of syllables and consonants and vowels and strategies that give us certain parts of our voice, that allow those parts of the voice to open up without too much effort, straining or striving. The art form of singing is to make it look effortless, and this is why a lot of people think that it's something that you're just born with, but that's a total myth, of course. I treat singing like a sport, and being a singer is like being an athlete of small muscles. And so it's about conditioning and stretching those muscles. That's kind of the most important thing. A lot of people are focused on the conditioning part, but the stretching is important too, and having a good routine. And then the other thing I would say, just before we get into exercises and the technical concepts, is cross training is really helpful, even for singing. If you're not doing exercise that helps to kind of work your core and all of these things, yoga, biking, swimming, there's a number of exercises that are really helpful just to get you some better core strength and coordination. And so sometimes, no matter what you're doing with your vocal training, it's actually something that the things that you're doing throughout the day, your routines that just keep your body healthy and in shape, that can really help boost your voice to the next level and help you develop a new awareness. So always a plug for that. Do some gentle exercise. Of course, you don't have to overdo it. If you're really tired and you're way over engaged with any sport that you're doing, that's going to make it hard to sing too. So it really does. Exercise helps you with increasing your breath capacity, with gaining a better sense of your core and these support and balance muscles that we're going to talk about in a second. So one of the biggest principles for strengthening your voice and the concepts of support is the SOVT style exercise. It sounds really, really technical, but it's actually not that complicated. So we'll start to talk about this. SOVT means semi-occluded vocal tract. And really what it is a closed space. Yes, exactly. Straws on water. That's a really good example, and can be really effective for a lot of people. So let's go into why it might seem like a little strange. Singing with a straw, exactly. That counts. The idea is a semi-occluded vocal tract is just where your mouth is somewhat closed. Your vocal tract is somewhat closed. And often it's using just the space of your nasal passage that's open. But in some of these cases, there's a little bit of space here in your mouth. And there's a really important reason for why we do this. So singing in general, in a nutshell, a huge component is its resistance of air. So our exhale, all our air just escapes. That's just how we breathe. But when we're singing, we're creating resistance and pressure, and that helps us go up in pitch the more pressure we have. And then when we release more air, it helps us go down in pitch. So it's just really hard to coordinate that. In fact, a lot of intonation issues have to do with just our inability to control that continuum with the pressure. It's really challenging. It takes a lot of focus and a good sense of how to control these muscles. It can be very subtle, actually. So we'll get into that in another time. Intonation is a whole topic. But the main concept here is when our mouth is barely open, or we have a semi-occluded vocal tract, it's easier to create and build up pressure in our body. When our mouth is open, all the air can rush out. And that makes open vowels actually a lot harder to sing and to support than a closed space. So we're going to talk about that. A closed space is a great way to feel, actually, and it seems very indirect, but your belly and your back. What singing technique do I teach? I mean, this is an interesting concept. I teach classical. I also teach contemporary, and I use a lot of this concept of SOVTs and also resonance, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I mean, some people throw around this term, the bel canto technique, or beautiful singing, resonant singing. There's often a lot of interpretations as to what that means, and it's kind of an age-old sort of romanticized term. We'll get into that at some point, perhaps, when we talk about the history of singing and music education and such. But I do have a classical background, and I love singing pop and contemporary music, so I like to do a little bit of both. This is really big in the classical realm, actually. Good, very good. So in the classical realm, this concept is called appagio. We don't have to worry about it. It means to lean against or to press out. And it's often in our lower abdominal area, our belly and our back. That's where we're trying to feel our support. It's right below your belly button. You can put a hand there as you're practicing some of these exercises that we're going to do and really try to feel for activity here. Now, I think it's really important to preface something here, which is singing in some parts of our range can be very subtle. These muscles don't move as much as we might think. They're active, but it can be really hard to feel. And that's what makes this really challenging in general is singing, is we want to have a really strong sensation and feeling to kind of give us some assurance. And often we end up using way too many things and over engaging and over supporting. So it's a lot of it is about bringing the voice into balance. And so, yeah, we'll keep going into this concept. So with an SOVT, we have a partially occluded or semi-occluded vocal tract. One of the really simple concepts is doing a breathing exercise like a hiss. I highly recommend it. You can think about sort of pulsing on it. So I'll do this kind of exercise to try and stimulate and get these muscles active. And this is really kind of the main concept. We have to move them a little bit in order for us to have control over it. We can't just be like, subtly try to flex these tiny muscles that you can barely feel. So what happens is sometimes we get confused when we're working in the vocal practice. We're trying to get these muscles to move, and then that's sort of worked into our muscle memory, and we're able to just have them happen as we sing. So we look for cues when our support and these types of things with our with the pressure system aren't quite working. That's when we we'll see these certain cues, and that's when we need to make sure we come back to exercises that help to sort of wake up these muscles and get them ready for singing. So hissing is a really great one. If you're a singer and you've been doing this for a while, you'll know this well. I just have a few things that I think can lead people astray that I want to mention. So here's the concept. My mouth is barely open on a hiss. It's like a TS sort of syllable. I'm going like. Now, a lot of people get the wrong idea and they want to push with the muscles here. They want to go like and squeeze with their mouth and their lips and their jaw. Really, the idea is just to keep the mouth barely open and see if you can just get your belly and your back to engage. So I recommend put a hand here, put a hand on your belly and your back, and see if you can feel these muscles engage. There's other tricks, even doing like a simple cough, like you'll feel this muscle kick out. You can blow against your hand. You can go, you can see even my cheeks pop out because the whole system is pressurizing. And you can do the straw thing like other people have mentioned. It's a real thing, although I recommend you don't have to buy like a fancy straw. It's my own professional opinion. You can just use any sort of small space. And so I often just use the hiss concept. Now, this is just using our breath without phonating yet. So I'll just demonstrate this a couple times, but you can do this on your own time. What I'll do is I'll kind of pulse into my breath and feel these muscles activate. So I'll go like, and you'll see, down here I'm going, these muscles are popping out, and I'm trying to get a sense of coordination from here rather than from my head and my neck. You can also do long breaths. You can go like, now our breath naturally caves in while we're exhaling. And this is going to happen eventually as you're doing any phrase. Eventually, your body's going to come in. We just want to try and maintain the ability of pushing out for as long as possible. Another thing to point out here is we talk a lot about the belly, and there's really no air down there, right? It's our organ, our diaphragm is pushing our organs down, and then we have a lot of maximum space for our lungs, and we're able to control the pressure from down here. So I recommend do some breathing exercises, play around with it. You can do like, and then try long ones. You can blow into the hand. You can do the straw exhaling. Now, it's not breathing in through a straw. That's also, I think, a really important thing to mention. Breathing in through a straw creates tension in this part of our throat. So it's just breathe in normally, relax, let the face and the nose open. And then it's all about working our exhale. So that's the breathing side. We're going to talk about how, I know, right? It sounds scary, right? You can hyperventilate that way. We're going to talk about how you can sort of take an exercise, and we'll use a simple one today. Start with the breath and then build this up like scaffolding. Then add another SOVT style exercise, and then slowly move to consonants and vowels, and perhaps eventually just pure vowels. Pure vowels can actually be some of the hardest singing and where a lot of habits can develop. So we have a simple exercise like this, or maybe we'll start from the top, like mama. We're gonna get to this. That actually might be harder than you might realize. Like we start singing, people's heads start coming up. All these little habits will immediately happen. So start with thinking about the breath. This top note is going to take more pressure than the bottom note. And so it's going to feel like, it's going to relax on the bottom note. Not completely, but that's sort of the architecture of it. So if I were thinking about, I can use breath first. Then another concept is to use just the pure M. That's a semi-occluded vocal tract thing. Basically, all of our consonants are semi-occluded vocal tracts. They're a closed space. So again, it's a fancy word for using your consonants appropriately to help build up pressure. You can use like a Z. I think that can be really, really effective, actually. An NG. We'll go over some of these. So I might go like with an M, or I might go zzz. And again, my body is pushing out. I'm trying to get this coordination of my breath pushing out as I sing this first note, and then actually relaxing for the lower note. So when we over support a sound, we call it pressing. And that actually can serve to weaken or make our voice smaller, because these muscles start to kind of lock and then they start squeezing. So that's if I'm like, right, pushing, it doesn't sound very comfortable. The other side of it, if you're under singing it and you don't have enough pressure, you might scoop up to it. You might be like, and sing flat or things like that. So the game is, can you do it like that without actually opening up? And you might find it's actually kind of awkward, and because a lot of the times we feel activity and we feel vibration here, and we want to start squeezing or collapsing these areas. Ultimately, you want to do this more in your lower register because we need a little bit of space as we go up higher. So again, I recommend do this in your lower register, feel for the coordination, and then the high notes will become available, as my old teacher used to say. When the high notes are available, you don't have to force yourself up into them. The body will get strong, and then you'll be able to access them. So I really like using this sort of continuum. We're going to take first a hiss. We're going to go like, and then we're going to try on a Z. Now here it can be, as we start singing, it can be very tempting to want kind of squeeze or clamp. Really just keep your face as relaxed as you can. See if you can get just the belly and the back to engage things. Now, if you're feeling this is already really hard, specific notes can be a challenge. Actually, as we get more and more specific, we tend to lock into tension, and then all of these types of habits and issues can happen. So perhaps start with some sirens on these concepts. You can just work your breath without thinking about any particular pitch. Then you can work the Z, and you can gently slide up and down. And I have another thing that I just want to talk about here, just in case people get the wrong idea about sirens. I just find it so silly when, and I don't know if you've ever had like a choir thing or a quick warm up where someone said, let's just do some sirens. And people go like, ooh, and they just go all the way up in their range and all the way back down. And it's like, let's stretch for a second. It's like jumping into the splits immediately. And it just seems like the worst thing. And it's not good for your voice at all. So my recommendation, if you're doing a siren or anything, to just kind of get a looser feeling of all of these things, yeah, it's not connected to your support and to that pressure system, is to start small, kind of rev up the engine. So I might do something like this. I might be like, I'm practicing pushing in and relaxing. And then I might go, zzz, zzz, zzz. It's more important that it's connected with your belly and your back, with that feeling of support. Pressing out, the pitch rises, and letting it relax, the pitch is going to free fall back down. If you're not quite doing that, you're not, as Chrissy mentioned, you're not connected to your support mechanism, and you're more likely to start using auxiliary muscles. This is sort of the conundrum here. And this is why we have to talk a little bit about the space and the shape before we move on. A lot of the problems that happen with the voice are because we don't have enough support and pressure in our belly and our back. And then these muscles try to compensate. They try to squeeze the space smaller to make it easier so that the air doesn't rush out. But obviously, we run into a lot of issues. The timbre and the tone's not great. We can block the motion of our vocal folds trying to move, and it ultimately can be very uncomfortable. So a lot of the time, support is just about maintaining that open space, having the right amount of pressure so that these muscles don't want to try and grip down. So we'll talk about, you can see these certain cues when your support isn't fully active. It can be hard to feel again, so we have to use these sort of indirect cues. So again, do some gentle warm-ups, work with the breath, maybe do some of the Z's or an M, like mm, or you can do an NG. Mm. Again, the goal is to try and isolate it in our belly and our back. I'm just moving up and down and feeling that continuum, getting a sense of my pressure coming out and relaxing. Now, let's go back to our exercise. So this is something that can really, really help before you even take things up higher, is to sort of do this scaffolding to make sure your body is really coordinated and connected. I'll start and I will go like, and then I'll go, and then we come to this, to the point where we start using consonants and vowels like ma, right? It's really helpful thing. It sounds very simple, but the reason I like to use this one is most words are closed to open. Now that's a huge thing if we think about the pressure system that we're supporting our sound with. When our mouth is closed, it's easier to support. When our mouth is open, it's harder to support. So what happens though is people tend to do this backwards, especially as we go up higher in anticipation of a high note. People tend to over support right away. They go like, let's like imagine we're here and we're like, and they squeeze and they press and then they let go on the vowel and they like, right? And you want to think of this as actually the other direction around. Our SOVTs are our stepping stones to help us support our open spaces. It gets us part of the way there, builds up some pressure, and then we're able to support out fully into our vowels. So when I'm thinking about this, it's more dynamic than just like mama. Of course, as you've been doing this for a while, your body's naturally going to start to coordinate appropriately. So instead, think about what happens when you sing with your M and you're like, can you support that without anything squeezing? Mama. And then you actually want to flex out into the vowel. So these exercises are all over the website. I use them all the time, but it's really important to kind of slow down. I do this with a lot of my students to really make sure that you're coordinating this appropriately. So this is the concept. We'll do like mama. Now that's going to help us get a slightly more full tone, right? Supporting out into the vowel. Otherwise, Ma. Breathy, we tend to think of as a slightly sort of, I wouldn't say like weaker voice because it can be a really beautiful thing, a more vulnerable voice, but a more filled out voice with the full tone open and the space open, it's actually going to sound stronger. So it's kind of an illusion in a lot of ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be that much louder. It just has to be full and open. So the process again, some exercise like this, you might go and then go and see if you can feel the belly and the back engage, and then mama. See if your body stays that way and continues to engage as you do your regular exercises. And then you can obviously take this into a song. A fifth is a very simple interval. I'll move this around my range and I'll just see where certain habits start to engage. And I'm not showing it because I really work on trying to keep everything very relaxed here. But a lot of times what happens when we start to sing something, even especially, for a lower voice, middle C like here is a really important point. It's kind of like the gateway into our middle to higher register. You'll see this happen. It'll go ma, ma, ma. And that means that there wasn't enough support in that transition. When you went mama, you didn't properly push out and build up some pressure so that when you open up, it stays consistent and your body doesn't move. So if you're not supporting enough in your belly and your back, this is going to happen. And really what it is it's the vocal tract kind of getting kinked and we're blocking some of the overtones up here. And that's going to make it harder and harder to sing. But the body is trying to make it work because it's a pressure system. So what you can do is you can check this. And again, this is, I know it's like, wait, I want to just go and hit the high notes. It's really about breaking these habits. So I'll put my hand back here. And if I'm doing this, I'm like, mama, and I can feel if these muscles are trying to engage and squeeze. It might be the jaw might start to hold on, like, get really tight. Mama, it should actually just be loose and hanging there. So that's kind of in a nutshell where a lot of issues happen. When we're not supporting enough, these muscles squeeze, they make the space smaller, and our voice sounds smaller and weaker potentially, or breathier. So this simple concept, because I'm not working with a direct student right now, I don't need to go through the full exercise. You can do those on the website and on other tutorials and things. But I might go through a practice and I might take this in different parts of my voice and be like, mama. Now this is low in my register, so I won't need quite as much energy. But then I move it up and I might be over here. So really imagine you're singing the note, use the breath, and then and then finally mama. You're feeling that buildup of pressure. Maybe I'll jump around something higher, like it might feel like more pressure, and then finally mama. And the cool thing is, by going through that process, your ma should just feel open and connected, and you don't feel like you have to work really hard at it. And this is, I think, the most important thing about all of these practices is we do all of this training so it's in our muscle memory, so we don't have to think about it so much when we're actually singing. We just want it to be connected to our mind, sort of have a mind-body connection. We want it to be connected and coordinated, and then all the other things kind of follow suit, especially when you have expression and a fun song that you're singing with lots of instruments happening and all of this stuff. So that's sort of a process. You can do this with almost any exercise you do. You can start with breath, then put in a Z, and then add a ma or a na, and we're going to go over a couple other ones in a second. So you might notice that these exercises I'm doing, they start with a higher note and they descend. And it's low in our register, but the reason I do this is I think it follows our natural course of our breath, which is to go, right? There's a pulse of it and then it releases. So it's kind of riding the current, actually. Now, when we start with a lower note and we rise up, it might feel like it's against the current and your support's going to start to activate a little more. So this is kind of what's so bizarre about this. So an exercise like ma, ma, if I go ma, 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 you might find as you do that exercise, you're more likely to want to lift up, especially as you kind of keep going incrementally higher and higher as we do half step by half step, right? Dun, 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 that kind of thing. So really watch. And again, this is why I like to start first with actually top down, and then it's very counterintuitive, and then you go from a lower note to a higher note, and you might start to feel this more. So I might go through this process again. I'll go like, now, do you notice this time the breath was a little different? And this is my big concept here. I started more relaxed because it's a lower note, and then I press out, and then I relax. So as phrases get more complicated, you can start to think of the architecture of your phrase this way. Where do I need to push out and support the sound a little more? And where actually do I need to let go? So in the process of strengthening our voice, a lot of people actually, they'll build up pressure and then they don't know how to let go of it. And then they end up pressing in these concepts that I talk about. And they find that their voice actually, they're working harder and harder, and their voice is getting smaller and smaller. And it's very, very frustrating. So you want to be really conscientious of this. It's first relaxed. Engaged, and then relaxed. And you might do this with the Z to feel it out a little more. Put your hand on your belly or your back, and it's zzz. You'll feel that zzz. Careful that you're not zzz, lifting, right? If that's happening, just keep doing it until you can soften that impulse a little bit, and do it low so that you actually have control over it. High, the higher and higher you go, the bigger these habits get and the less in control of them we are. So that's why it's so important actually to start lowering your register to strengthen things. Work your voice from the middle out. Often the voice relaxes a little bit and then it starts to grow up higher and get more full. So the process again is, and then and then you might try ma, ma, ma. And every time you have that M is a chance to kind of to change the amount of pressure that's happening. It's sort of a way to build it up and to get prepared for the vowel as a stepping stone. So again, ma, ma, ma. And then you might, I'd separate it out there just to feel it out, and then I might connect it. Ma, ma, ma. So how does this apply to when we're singing? That's really the idea is we have words where there are consonant and vowel combinations all over the place. So you can actually find places where you can use an SOVT or your consonant to really own it and get a sense of building up that pressure a little more. The break between chest and head voice, that's something that we might have to do for another lesson. It's sort of a little more on the concept of registration, but it's all connected. So maybe I can get to that a little bit towards the end. So I've been talking a lot about M because it's a very, nice and simple consonant SOVT to work with. There's also N. Now the trick there, let's say we're doing the same exercises, is make sure your jaw doesn't try to move with it. It's actually really your tongue coming up to the hard palate, and that's how we're sealing the space. So when we're like ma, 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 na, na, na. Now people, same sort of thing happens. People want to press with their tongue and get kind of tight, or their jaw tries to move and help. Try to just keep it like that. Na, na, na. I find that one to be really, really helpful for some people. Sometimes the M isn't as comfortable. So the point is to find the sort of path of least resistance with all of this. The other one is the NG, right? Or just going like, that can be very uncomfortable for some people. But actually it's really helpful, and it leads me to the next exercise. I find this one to be kind of like the bench press for singing. Because the NG, the tongue is coming up in the back towards the soft palate and closing there, it's really close to this whole area of alignment where our vocal tract, a large portion of our vocal tract is. And so it really helps me get a sense of the tube and how to keep it open, get some more resonance. And then ultimately, it's just like all the other things, it's an SOVT. So it's a chance to build up some pressure with the closed space. As long as you're not trying to press with the tongue there, it's just holding a space closed very gently. So the feeling here is all very, very gentle. And that's, again, where a lot of the issues come is people over support into their consonants and they under support their vowels. And you have to flip that around. And then all of a sudden the engine is moving appropriately and you're going to get a bigger, stronger sound. So here's the exercise that I like to do. It's a fourth, but if we're thinking of like scale degree intervals, I'm going from 5 to 1, kind of like a ta-da, here comes the ride kind of a thing. And we're going now as you take that higher and higher, you're going to start to notice some of these dilemmas, some of the things where the tongue's going to want to squeeze, the jaw might try to come up. And this is the practice. This is what we're working towards. It's actually working those coordinations out of the voice. They come and they go, from day to day. As I always say, we talk and it's visual, and we tend to do a lot with our face. And when we sing, it's more of the internal space. We don't want to have as much motion here, actually. And so we want it to be actually very loose, kind of floaty. So I'll take this in different places and be like, and that NG is a chance to get half the way there. So my body, I know you can't quite see what I'm doing down here, but I'm pressing out a little bit. And then it's fully supporting out into the vowel. So it's like stepping stones. I highly recommend that one. It feels really weird at first. And then for a lot of my students, they're like, wait, this is everything. I can really feel the strength. I can feel the track nice and open and relaxed. So it's like, you can take this up in different places. And again, so this is pretty high. It's up and on E flat. Not so crazy. It depends on where your voice is. But if you're a lower voice singer and not a tenor, that's going to feel like up there. So what happens is people go, and they start squeezing with these muscles. Can you maintain that support from your belly and your back? Keep this all just hanging there. That's actually going to be an easier way than just trying to use a vowel all the way up until your voice breaks. Yeah. Yeah, it's like an open mouth hum is the way people talk about it. Like the tongue in the back, and it's actually just sealing it there. So I actually I consider these sort of different consonant zones, right? We've got lip consonants, ma, ba, pa, wa. We'll go over that some other time. And then closing from here, tongue to hard palate, ta, da, la, na, ra, all that kind of stuff. And ga, ka, ya. These are our tools. There are tools to find actually and build up pressure and strength in our voice. So just doing a simple fifth here, you can do all sorts of fancy exercises, but it's really more about the coordination. So that's always the thing to show people is like, it's good to practice all these different shapes. You don't want to just only use a fifth. I'm using this just to show this as an example. Again, people, when they're in, and then issues happening, this is going to happen. These muscles are going to get tight. They're going to start to condense. You want the opposite. And you might be thinking, okay, well, how do I get that tongue not to happen? Everything that we just talked about, start with the breath thing, right? Maybe go like, and then keep that all as still as you can. If that's too high for you, go to a lower place where you can actually do it and then grow from there. That's how we condition our voice. And then eventually, we're trying to support that open vowel. So that's a routine. that's sort of the concept there, is first start with the breath, then go to some sort of, the breath. This is already a semi-occluded vocal tract thing because I'm going rather than like something like that where it's completely open. And then add phonation like a Z or an NG or an M. And then try to do something with a consonant. And if you're feeling really good about it, you can go back and just try pure open vowels. And this leads me to sort of the next concept. So we do a lot of conditioning with the voice, right? We want a routine like this. You're not going to get it in one day. You're going to do this a little bit every day. And all of a sudden, you're going to find that the coordination gets better and better. You get a stronger sound. But a lot of times when people are so focused on conditioning, they forget to do any vocal stretching or things that help to open the back space, get a little more resonance. And so this is kind of the icing on the cake. With the voice, it's always about balance. So if you're trying to condition your voice higher and higher, and you feel like by the end of a practice, it's just really tired, things are starting to compress more, it's a sign that, you're perhaps overdoing it. You need to just slow it down, try and in a lower range, and just really focus on the sensation and make sure that these habits, the neck and head isn't trying to engage. You can move your head and your neck around as you're singing a little bit. I always recommend this. People get kind of two-dimensional when they sing, and I'm like, you can move your head around like from side to side. In fact, people enjoy that. You look less like a robot. So that's, So again, the concept here is I always say it's good to do a little bit where you stretch the back of the vocal tract. I call this sort of vocal stretching when we use anything like a glide, like a yaw. I'm trying to get a tongue to move, or a wah. I'm trying to get the lips to move. And it ultimately will help us find our resonance or that ring in our sound. And this is the thing. This is why I'm bringing this up. What does it mean to have a strong voice? You can't just muscle it with support. Support's more about stability, and it's about keeping the voice and the vocal tract open. So that's kind of the funny concept. It's really the resonance, right? And the ring and the amplification of resonance that makes our voice louder and louder. So support is a key factor in that, but it is not everything. In fact, it's kind of severely lacking if you're not thinking about the other side, which is finding the right resonance space. Now, that seems really complicated. It's like, how do I know? Every sound's a little, every part of my range is a little different. The vowels all feel a little different. The body knows best. And so I use glides, these things like ya and wah, to help calibrate, to kind of create a stretch and some motion. It's when we get really static and lock in place that we tend to block our resonance. So the idea here is take a simple exercise, again, like what we were doing, right? We would mama. Now, ya. Now here's the goal, right? When we speak, we want to go ya. It collapses things back here. It kind of squeezes the mechanism. We call this spreading. Instead, just use your tongue. It's the major mover of our vowels. We have ya, ya. You can use it as a stretch. Ya. So I might go through this routine and layer things in. I might, as I'm noticing, okay, maybe my support's not so active. I might go, and then trying to get that support going. But you can see there's a drawback there, right? I'm using these closed spaces. You might tend to kind of close in the back a little bit. We're trying our hardest not to do that, but it's a tendency of that kind of exercise. And then ma, and then I might find, I'm getting a little stuck. Then go through it and try one of these stretching things with the glide, like ya, ya. It helps to kind of create and open a little bit of space. It's sort of an opposite coordination. And then go back, ma, and see if it coordinates a little better. And be patient with it, right? The idea is, again, we're trying to coax our body into the right type of coordination. And it has to happen a little more automatically for singing to be fun and organic. We can't just sit there trying to think about all these technical things. We need our body to do it for us. So I go through this sort of routine, and I change it based on what I need. So I might be higher up, and might be going like, and I feel a lot of pressure. Then I need to go back and go, ya, Try to get a little more of that stretch and space, and then go back and do the end. Be like, ma. That sort of concept. Is this all making sense to everybody? Do you have any questions? I feel like I've been talking for a little bit, and just want to get some feedback on what for you have you found rewarding or confusing about the process of trying to strengthen your voice. And it might lead to another concept, which is we're doing a lot of conditioning and stretching, and that's a huge part of everything. But there's some other things that kind of create the illusion of loudness or fullness. I don't know, do any of you have sort of any ideas on that? What have you found that works for you? Not to put you on the spot, anybody. I'll just leave that open for a sec, so I don't answer it, although I'm very tempted to just answer it for the class. Yes, well, what is a hum, really? This is kind of my point. A lot of these tactics. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I forget that the time zones are totally different, and perhaps in the future, let me know, because we can move these around and sort of just exploring what's a good time for everybody. That's really late. I admire that commitment. That's really great. Well, let me just answer. So the other thing that I think really adds to our concept of strength is one thing I mentioned, which is resonance, or that ring in our sound, which really has to do with having the right amount of support pressure, but also the right space and release so that our vocal tract can resonate appropriately. And when you feel it right, you might feel your chest buzz, you might feel some extra buzz in your sinuses and the face and your head and stuff. A lot of this is sympathetic vibration, right? It's really just all happening here. It's telling you that there's a lot of good resonance. That makes the sound carry. So it's part of the concept of efficiency. Support kind of initiates our sound, and the resonance often is what sustains it. I really do believe like resonance is is kind of more primary than even support. I mean, it depends on what style that you're singing with, but a lot of these lighter styles, we're using a lot of work with resonance and the acoustics. That's for a whole other topic. I can't go super deep into it because there's just so much in it. And I singing is overtone singing a lot of the time. Every vowel has a sweet spot, and you calibrate this by finding the right amount of support so you can keep that space open. But it's really, I think that's almost as important, if not more important. So that's one part of it. Often by working your support techniques and your SOPTs, you help to break these habits that make everything squeeze. And so you're actually going to be more likely to start hearing resonance and use that as your guide, right? If the resonance is getting blocked, you might be overdoing it, you might be underdoing it. Just like this, if our head is coming out, that's a sign that we're probably underdoing it. And then I have another concept to think about, and these are all other large topics, but they definitely add to what we consider like a powerhouse strong voice. The other thing is vibrato. Vibrato allows us to actually expand the range of our sound a little bit, because when we do vibrato, it's that sine wave sound, right? Like if I'm like, yeah, that vibration, it's, that's a little more of a classical thing. There's vibrato in all sorts of styles, but the idea is I'm oscillating around that pitch, right? Sort of centered around the pitch. And that gives me a slightly wider sonics, shape, right? And that's, if you're singing straight tone, it's going to have a limit, like mama versus mama. There's a reason why a lot of classical singers add vibrato for efficiency. Thank you. I do love singing some classical music from time to time, as much as I like pop music as well. It's like the Olympics of singing, right? So I highly recommend this to you all as well. If you're trying to find strength in your voice, try some classical stuff out too. It's definitely worthwhile. Now, the vibrato, there's a couple things that happen, right? This is oscillating and moving. It helps us relieve some of the pressure. But ultimately, yeah, we're talking about the fullness of the sound and the tone, right? That's really the illusion of loudness, is how sort of open the space is here so that your whole vocal tract and this whole area can vibrate really well. So vibrato is a great way to kind of open up and expand the sound. You know, the classic like musical theater thing, right? Where they're like, and right? They're kind of holding it back. They do straight tone, yeah, and then the vibrato really fills out the sound. So you'll notice in a lot of like big powerhouse moments, right? They're implementing some vibrato. Now, if you're like, I don't know how to do vibrato, it's a product of healthy singing. It's a whole topic. I just did a course on it. Hopefully, it'll come out at some point soon. We've got some other ones on the website, and probably it'll be one of these live sessions too. Is how to kind of find your vibrato and get it to access. But that's a huge part of this. You know, when you get the right amount of support, especially using these SOVTs, and you think about being careful with your onset. You know, this just giving some terms to things when we do our like mama, right? The idea there is to be gentle with the M, right? The onset, and that's the onset of the sound is when we start and supporting out to the vowel. When you start to do all of these things and you get that space going, vibrato starts to naturally occur. It's a response to having the appropriate amount of pressure and chord compression, resonant space, and this will make your voice amplify, right? So when we think about like an oboe or other musical instruments, the sound amplifies when everything finds its sweet spot, when it's just the right amount of friction. And it's the same thing with the voice. Every note has a range and a sweet spot, and we have to sort of feel this out from day to day. You know, I'm not going through this exercise as I normally do, where I'm, you know, ma 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 ma. But the reason we so carefully go half step by half step, sometimes bounce around, is to get a sense of calibrating. What does it feel like in our low register? How much energy do I need there? How much energy do I need from a closed to an open space when I go higher? And a lot of the times the issues that we have is just we mismatch the amount of energy and the amount of space. And that's when people crack, or sort of a lot of things can happen that are less than ideal. Oh yes, you know, we'll talk about that. There's a forum, actually, on the website, and you can always shoot me questions there, and someone will often alert me. Every once in a while, I check them as well too, and you can ask questions before, you know, if you don't feel quite ready to try out a one-on-one lesson. Although I highly recommend it if all of this is feeling like way over your head. It's really about feeling this out. And I think, you know, I always put a plug for this. What makes singing so confusing is it's about bringing your voice into balance. And we all have slightly different tension things. It's a mind-body connection. There's a lot with how we approach it. You know, the stress and anxiety that can come from trying to sound good and to impress people. I always say it's a feeling-based art form. Go with what feels good first. It's a wellness activity. And so, yeah, I totally get that. It's very nerve-wracking to like want to book a session, but I do say that that's where a lot of the biggest sort of changes happen, is when you can get something custom made for you and have the guidance of a teacher to find a right kind of routine that'll help bring your voice into balance. Right? A lot of people have the issue of their head and their neck coming out. It's very common, but some people have the opposite issue where they're kind of pushing back this way. Got you. Yes. Well, you know, send a message on the forum if you've got questions. I always love to answer them, and because it can be helpful for someone else. You know, we often have similar tendencies because our bodies aren't that different. It's the physiology of it. So we've only got a few minutes left. Hopefully this was helpful as a guide. You know, I know you've got the exercises on the website as well to work through things, but I'm just trying to fill in some of those extra details that can lead people astray when you're trying this without having a teacher to kind of be like, oh, right there, you know, you're over supporting, or I can tell that you're not appropriately letting go of your pressure for your lower notes, right? You're so amped up. Often, sometimes we're trying to hit higher and higher notes. We get so amped up, and then you go to try to sing a lower in your lower range, and you realize it's all completely like squeezed and compressed. And that's again why I say do warm downs, do stretches. If you're working on strengthening your voice, it's about a full routine, right? You can't just strengthen your body. You have to stretch your body. And it's the same thing with the voice. So what are you doing to relax your voice? What are you doing, singing some gentle songs too, right? We want to just sing like, there's so many pop songs that are just about kind of really kind of exciting and getting people awake. You know what I mean? It's sort of like catching your attention. And I find, flip flop back and forth. If you're someone who sings like lots of really intense songs because you're trying to get that power, sometimes the answer is actually to find the opposite. To allow yourself to relax into your tone. Less is more. My teacher would always say this. It's a balance-based art form. So when you find balance in the sweet spot, that's when it gets louder. And there's always this temptation to want to push. And it's just not quite that. It's more like being a snake charmer. You have to be a little delicate, watch for visual cues, and listen for resonance, listen for vibrato. Those are always signs that the voice is functioning in a healthy way. And yes, we'll get to that. That's actually my next session. Our next episode next week is going to be all about head voice practice. This was mainly all chest voice stuff, and we'll talk about that totally other register, which can be very loud. In fact, it's sort of funny, but often when I'm doing head voice examples for the tutorials, we have to turn the mics down because it'll clip, because it's just, it's higher up in your register. It may feel lighter and more ethereal because of the type of resonance and how it functions. It's like changing gears in a car. It's better for higher RPM. But you actually use the same kinds of support techniques. And this will be a really great segue into that. People a lot of the time, yeah, exactly. People a lot of the time under support their head voice because of the sensation of it being kind of this like light, sort of hollow thing. But then if I engage my support, I can start to fill out that tone. And we'll talk about sort of a nice routine to work that as vowels get wider, it gets harder to support in head voice. That'll be really exciting. I love singing in head voice. I think in some ways it's kind of easier when you get these extremes, right? Very, very relaxed singing and very engaged athletic singing. It's hard in the middle, right? When the coordination gets a little murky. And so this is why it's so important to do these kinds of exercises. Why do we go half step by half step? It might seem a little rote or a little sort of boring, but it's really about paying attention to what it feels like. In reality, I go back and forth. I try something here and be like, ma, ma, ma. And then I'll try to go down a little bit, like, ma, ma, ma. Just make sure I can really relax into my sound, release breath. Like, ma, ma, ma. Once I have that release, I might start taking it higher again. When I start to feel like I'm fighting and I'm getting really high, ma, ma, ma. Things are starting to lift a little bit. Ma, ma, ma. Then I take it back a little bit. And maybe I'll go back to the breathing exercises, or I'll go back to doing just the like, and feel like, oh, my support's kind of crumpling. I'm not quite activated there. Now that's activated, ma, ma, ma. See, is that impulse a little more relaxed? Am I less likely to move? And that's where a lot of the practice is. Of course, you can see why this is tricky in like a module type of format. We want to kind of have something systematic, but you may notice that like, oh, I'm going up and up and up, and this habit's starting to happen. That's when you have to stop yourself. You go back and you try to make sure you can do it the right way. That's the practice. If you're patient like that, your voice is going to improve and strengthen way faster. It's usually just, I'm constantly just trying to help people break these certain habits and identify them. And then just over time, the voice just opens, and that's really a huge part of it. Everyone can do this. It just takes some patience and really listening to your body, your proprioception, your interoception, all fancy words for how we feel things that we can't really quite see, or how we're holding our body, these muscles that are moving more internally. So yes, this is the concept. That's how we strengthen our voice. It's mainly through these SOVT things, by working consonants, but make sure you stretch, make sure you work your breath first, then add some SOVTs. and then try working from a closed to open space like a mar, nar, nga. And I like these fifths and fourths; they're very strong. To have a stronger sound, and it moves your voice a little bit around a little bit in a wider shape, and that you're more likely to feel your support going. I'm glad you're happy with your progress. Yeah, and again, I know this is my first time, and so I don't have necessarily a lot of people watching, but I, encourage, spread the message around. And if you have other questions, go to the forum, ask me, and it'll give me a good idea of what I can do in the future to sort of help with these concepts, what's been confusing, what you're struggling with. And this is all purely technical stuff, right? We're working on our technique, the feeling of our voice and how it coordinates. And just know that we do that so we don't have to think about it when we're actually performing. We can just sort of get lost in the music. When it's good, it's good. It sounds like a silly sort of thing to say, but when it's good, it's good. Just, if your voice is sounding really beautiful and you feels full and you're not in any discomfort, then you're doing it right. Technique is what works. And so I think sometimes people are nervous, like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. Well, record yourself, get some feedback from some other people. And if it's sounding really good and it's working for your art, then that, leave it at that. Of course, I love learning about the voice and how it works and getting people, I'm fascinated with the whole mechanism and everything. But this is it's just one aspect of the practice. So don't get so stuck up on it. Just do little bits of this here and there, and know that it's just to make everything else easier when you're singing and performing, and leave it at that. So yeah, thank you so much. Well, I'm so glad you guys enjoyed the session. It's a little more off the cuff than when I'm doing one of these tutorials where we're trying to be very specific, and so I can kind of bounce back and forth different points. So yeah, very, very good. I look forward to the next time. Any last minute questions before we close up today? It's going once, going twice. Yes, and this is a challenge, right? Is we have different ranges, and it certainly, like, you want to, it's nice to emulate someone in a similar range so you can really get a sense of that. Certainly that can be really helpful. Finding different artists to emulate in a similar range can be really helpful as well. So, well, thanks so much for sticking on, you two, and I will catch you all next time for head voice stuff, which I'm super excited about. So definitely come back to hear more about that. All right, take care, everybody.